Palestine to me is a lot more than just politics and the news and what we see every day happening there. Palestine to me is a culture, beautiful culture. It's art, it's cuisine, it's poetry. There's a lot more about Palestine than just politics. One of the most things that I admire from the Palestinian culture is the Palestinian folkloric dance known as Dabka, which is a group dance that's based on feet and legs movement and stomping in one beat together as a group. I learned Dabka when I was young in Palestine. When I came to the US and went to High State University, I started a Dabka group there and called it the Art of Freedom. This was back in 2009. And one of the most things that makes me happy up to this day and my very proud moments is when I see that this group still exists. And when I see these new students perform at different events at the High State University and other local events like weddings and other celebrations. To see that this message continued on, that people are still interested in this dance and they still showcase it, is something that always makes me happy. I started another group for focusing on the kids, the young kids, the second and third and fourth generations that have some attachment to Palestine but don't know much about it other than the news and what's going on there. So I started this group to teach these young kids Dabka, and they always were happy to learn and they always asked nice questions. And then today I see a lot of these kids who back in 2015 and 16 were very young and started this program with us, and today they graduated and they're actually at the universities joining the Art of Freedom and joining other groups at their universities to continue on with spreading this message and showing this beautiful part about Palestine that so many people don't know.
Hi, my name is Peter, last name is Kumsiya, but to explain to people here how to say it in the US, I say Kumsiya. It's like you're saying, hey, I'm gonna come see ya. I was born in Bloomington, Indiana, but I grew up and lived most of my life in Palestine, in Beit Sahor, which is a small town near Bethlehem, for about 20 years. And I've been in the US 17 years, so my life is almost split 50-50 between the US and Palestine. It's amazing seeing the difference in lifestyle and just in life in general between here, the US and Palestine, where I grew up. For example, growing up in Palestine, I remember as a kid, all we did almost all day, every day is put 2 rocks on one side, 2 rocks on the other side of the street and play soccer until we could not see the ball anymore. It's so cool here. I have 2 boys, 6 and 1, and it's really cool seeing the difference, you know, how there's so much more to do besides just electronics and phones and tablets and stuff. Just there's freedom. We can go on road trips. We can get in the car and travel forever. And, you know, it's just, you can do whatever you want. Where in Palestine, in Beit Sahor, in Bethlehem, where I grew up, it was, you know, a once in a lifetime thing if we were able to, for example, go to the beach, right? Because, you know, we might get a permit from Israel to let us enter where the beach is. They may not. So as a kid, you just learned that disappointment is normal. You might have your stuff ready and your swimsuit ready and you're ready to go to the beach, but then the soldier at the checkpoint just decides he doesn't want to let you guys go through for whatever reason. He's just in a bad mood, and you just turn around and go back home. And as a kid, that was normal. Seeing my kids now, I can't even imagine if I tell them we're going to the beach and then halfway through I say, sorry, we're going back.
My name is Manar Sha Mustafa Raghab Abdussalam Al-Tajani. I like to say my name because it just traces back to all my grandfathers who were born and raised in Palestine, and so just saying my full name, it just connects me to back home, I feel. So I was born in California. 3 years old, my father decided that we should be closer to family, like anybody I would hope would think that it's better to raise your kids around like-minded individuals, or not so like-minded, but family, like that who share the same value. It takes a village after all, right? And so he sold the house, sold the car, gave away all the appliances and my car seat, all that. Sent a big container to Palestine because that was the plan, to move there. We flew into Jordan, and unbeknown to him, he had lost his residency card, his Hawiyah, and they stamped our passports, no entry. And I recall at the time the IDF patrol people carrying these big guns, and as a 3-year-old that was very terrifying. You know, seeing the stress within the family and being turned away, leaving everything we've known in the US to go back home, and then we're basically had to come up with a new plan and stayed in Jordan. And so since that day, I recall every time we would pass a police officer, I would scream at the top of my lungs, just because I was just terrified. Everyone with a gun seemed like a bad guy. And yes, I viewed everyone with a gun as a bad guy up until recently, because just the power that the gun gives you over someone else makes you just inhumane.
So one night that happened while I lived in Palestine. It was, I believe, the year 2002 when I was in 6th grade. I will never forget what happened during that night. We were about to go to sleep, and then very high explosions started to happen all around our city. We didn't know what was going on. We lost electricity and phone connection, so we didn't know what's happening. And the bombing was very intensive, and every single bomb that dropped shook our entire house. We knew it was targeting most likely the Palestinian Authority at the time, the Palestinian President Yasser Arafat, we assumed that this is targeting his compound, which was just a few blocks away from my parents' house. All night, the bombings did not stop. All night, the explosions kept on shaking our house, one after the other. My sister and I were terrified. We were young. We insisted that my parents come sleep in our room with us. We called the school. They said that we still had to go. It was finals exams. So I went to my school in 6th grade, and I had a final in history and geography. I remember that well. After we finished the final, a few of my friends and I decided that we're not going to go home. We want to go see what happened last night. So we walked from school on our own to the headquarters, which we called Al-Muqata'a. And we saw the destruction that happened that night was horrific. That compound included over maybe 20 or more buildings, and all of these buildings were down to rubble. I can't describe how that felt and how it impacted my life from that point on.
I love talking about Palestine. When some people are nervous about asking questions, so they'll say, oh, I'm sorry if this is a stupid question, or can I ask you this? I always say the first thing I say is, I love talking about Palestine. I love telling you about my childhood and how I grew up and where I grew up. So yeah, please ask anything. There are no stupid questions. The things that kind of bother me a little bit is when someone assumes, or he or she assume that they know everything about what's going on in Palestine from what they hear on CNN or Fox News or any of our networks here in the US. Unfortunately, that's what I always tell people, that those don't even give you half the story. they're so biased sometimes that you think you know everything, but you really don't. So I always tell everyone I talk to, honestly, go and see for yourself. Don't just take my word for it. Yes, I grew up there, and yes, my grandparents were born in Palestine, so were my parents, and everything I saw and learned is always firsthand or told, I was told that stuff from, my parents and my grandparents. But at the same time, I always tell everybody, go see for yourself. Don't take my word for it. Don't take anyone's word for it. It's actually really cool to see people, their reaction when they go and see stuff on their own, and they realize like, wow, that is not what I expected, or that is the opposite of what I thought. Some of the common misconceptions that I hear from people is, wow, you're Palestinian? Are you a Palestinian Christian? And I am. And that's always, people are very surprised. Everyone assumes everyone in Palestine is Muslim. No, I'm a Palestinian Christian. Something that's a lot worse is people say, I thought all Palestinians were terrorists. Like, you seem like a nice guy. Well, yeah, that's what the media makes you think. They say the Israel-Hamas war. It's not really the Israel-Hamas war, right? Palestine is not all Hamas. It's a political movement. You can't have a war against a political movement. So it's really the Israel-Palestine war.
My grandmother lived in a house near the entrance of El Bira, which is just a block or two away from Israeli illegal settlement called Beit Il, where there was a checkpoint in front of that settlement that controlled everything that came in and out of the city, cut the ties between the city and all other cities and villages and towns in the West Bank. So every Friday during the Intifada from the year about 2000 to 2005 or 6, Palestinians, men, women, teenagers, elders, students, marched from their mosques, from the city center of Ramallah and Al Bira towards this checkpoint as protests and demonstrations against this checkpoint and the continued blockage of this checkpoint, against the expansion of the settlement, and against the Israeli occupation of the Palestinian people. My grandmother prepared herself all week long for these protests. She was older at the time, she was in her 70s, couldn't really walk that well. So what she did was, all week long, she would fill up water bottles at her house, put them in the refrigerator and the freezer and in her neighbors' refrigerators to keep them cold. She would collect fruits from her trees and from the houses in the neighborhood, which all belong to extended family, including grapes, oranges, peaches, whatever she could find on these trees. And on Friday morning, she would set up a table and a chair in front of her house and wait for the protest to come to her street. So again, the protest would reach the checkpoint, they would demonstrate, and often once they get there, the Israeli soldiers would start shooting, starting with gas, grenades, to all kinds of firearms afterwards, including live bullets, and often injuring many Palestinians and even killing some during these protests that usually, and always actually, were non-violent civil protests. I was a little boy. I was around 11 years old when all this started, and I would go and sit next to my city at her table and watch her do her thing. I remember she told me one day, each one of us has a role and has a job and could do something in this movement. She said, I'm an old lady. I can't go and throw rocks with these men and women. I can't protest and stand up for a long time. But what I'm doing is helping them do what they can do. And each one of us has a role.
So people ask me all the time if I would ever want to move back to Palestine, or if I want to stay here, or what my plans are for the future. So I can't say I've planned my entire future, but I can say this. I miss Palestine. There's days that I wish I was in Palestine, and there's days that I really want to go back and live in Palestine. But realistically, the reason I'm here in the US and not in Palestine is because I want my family and I want my two boys, who are 6 and 1, to have what I couldn't have growing up.
Being a Palestinian American and carrying both of these identities is a very, very difficult thing for me and very complicated. I am extremely attached to and have passionate for and committed to my ancestral land and country, Palestine, and to always be active and work on getting people mobilized to demand the rights of the Palestinian people and the end of the oppression in Palestine, the occupation, the oppression, the genocide, the ethnic cleansing, the apartheid regime, all of these things. I'm committed to this, to fight for the rights of those people, my people. At the same time, I'm a US citizen who lives in the US, who pays taxes in the US, who owns a business in the US. And I know that my country, the United States, is the one who's sponsoring all these atrocities in Palestine through my own money and taxes. And I'm very troubled by it. Human life is a human life, no matter what this human, no matter who this human is or what the background is of this human. And I don't understand this unquestionable support to Israel. Having both of these identities is a clash that I deal with every single day. When I was 15, I was selected to come to a program in the US called the Presidential Classroom in DC, where we get to experience the DC life and we get to experience the political system in DC and meet different officials. And I really wanted to come, but my US passport was expired. I went to the Columbia checkpoint with my mom, which is the checkpoint separating between Jerusalem and El Bira, my hometown. And at the checkpoint, they refused to let my mom in because she didn't have a military permission to enter Jerusalem or Israel. I was under 16, so I was able to pass, but without her. So my mom said, well, we gotta go home. The US was not able to do anything about it. So carrying those two identities on a daily basis is a daily struggle for me that I don't know how to resolve and do not understand. I do not understand how we could still support all this injustice happening in front of us, documented, and not say anything about it.